Very recently, we talked about all the different kinds of DLCs that the Yakuza games have. And after delving into that, we know for sure that there is a certain number of oddities around the original releases of Yakuza 3 and 4 both. And we know from that, and just in general, that games can have differences between one version to another. We've already talked about how the original release of Yakuza 3, for example, cut out a whole bunch of stuff. But then most of that stuff was brought back in the remaster. However, we're still not fully done taking a look at some of the obscure stuff about the original PS3 releases, particularly with Yakuza 4. You see, for the most part, the original PS3 releases and the remasters really aren't that different from each other. They still have the same story, the same characters, well, maybe you can make an exception for Tanimura, the same soundtrack, the same side content, for the most part. The original Yakuza 4 had a set of modes that unfortunately remains exclusive to it to this day. And just going off of memory, these were not DLCs, these were added as part of the weekly updates that most RGG games have. This is a video about the Lost House of Extras, plus a tragedy, the disappearance of one Bob Utsunomiya. Before we delve into Yakuza 4's case, let's provide a bit of a history lesson for those who aren't fully aware about some context that is important to what we're going to talk about. First, let's talk about who Bob is. Now, Bob is something of a meme NPC, and generally speaking, he's pretty adored by the community. He's a man in a white suit, clown makeup, and a green afro, and in most of the games that he shows up in, he's only good news because he always bombards you with item packs. Item packs plus completion rewards, and those item packs are really good because they give you stuff like heals, weapons, armor, cheat items, which really help with completion. In other words, he's almost always good news because he just brings you good stuff. And in Yakuza Dead Souls, you can actually partner up with him to shoot down the undead. Now for the missing modes, let's go back one game for a bit. You may or may not remember this, but in Yakuza 3 you can find a fortune teller called Naomi, which has a set of modes you can access by talking to her, and you can find her either in Purgatory or the second floor of Okinawa's public market. You can only find her in Premium Adventure, which is basically the free roam mode that you unlock after beating the main story. She'll have a total of 4 modes that are available, that being Battle for Survival, Survival Tag, All-Star Tournament, and All-Star Tag Tournament. All of these modes can give you a lot of money depending on your performance. We'll briefly explain what each of these is about because at least one of them is relevant for later. Battle for Survival is a one-of-a-kind mode that never saw a peer in any of the later games, and I honestly wish that they bring it back either in the same form or similar enough. The game mode takes you to the gate of Kamurocho and brings all of your combat abilities back to level 1. And the objective is to find and fight as many story bosses as you can or want before you eventually fight the main objective, Mine, at Theater Square, which is how you win the game. But be warned, Mine is beefed up in this game compared to the main story. Whereas he had 3 health bars in the main story, he has 5 here. You can go there straight away, or you can take your time to build Kiryu up. It's completely up to you, and I really love the freedom of it. You can earn a very good sum of money depending on how many bosses you've beat, so that's gonna be a good way to make money even if it's a bit difficult. If you beat every boss, you can easily get over 3 million yen, though one run could take you up to an hour. You always start with 2 randomized items. One of them is always a healing item and the other is always a weapon. The healing item could be anything from the many energy drinks, and the weapon, well, if you're unlucky, you can get something completely useless like the fake pistol, which does no damage. There's a certain order in which the bosses spawn, so it's not like they all just spawn at once. You actually have to kind of fight your way gradually from one specific boss to another, and the order of them is as follows, and please correct me if I'm wrong or if there's kind of another order to it. Hasabe near Stardust, Tamashiro near Shangri-La, Kanda at the Hotel District, Hamazaki near Purgatory, Joji near the MEB, Laukalong near the Coin Lockers, Richardson in the same place you first fight him in the alleyway, and finally, Majima in Children's Park. And after that, all that's left is Mine in Theater Square. After each of these boss fights, you get the option to either continue or stop and just take the money. Because if you die at any given point, you only get half the money that you're supposed to get. Keep in mind that normal street fights are still available, so you could get lucky and get extra healing items from those. And trust me, you might need all the healing items that you can get in this mode, because you can't buy items from convenience stores and you can't heal at restaurants. So healing is very, very, very limited here. The bosses, after you beat each one of them, will also give you one random healing item. Could be something as low as a simple Stamina X, or it could be something as a big of a deal as a Stamina Spark. Then we have Survival Tag, a very interesting game mode in which you're dropped in Theater Square and you're instructed by SMS messages to do specific tasks. You'll be given 10 missions over time that require you to use your knowledge of Kamurocho to be able to fulfill the objectives. These things include interacting with the entrance of an establishment, and it can include establishments that aren't marked on the map, recreating a photo in first-person view, or maybe waiting around in a specific spot for some time. The catch is, there's 5 terrifying pursuers that are on the hunt for you. And the more objectives you do, well, guess what? The more of them join in. All of these pursuers look exactly the same, and that pursuer is Bob Utsunomiya. Yeah, remember when I said earlier that he's good news for the most part? And in most of the games that he shows up in, he's only good news. Well, in this mode, he can be something of a nightmare. He is not someone you want to be around in this mode, because you can literally get Bob jump scared in this mode.
You fucking you, blood!
If you're not careful in narrow spaces. And that will cost you the whole game, and you will miss out on some money that you could have earned. So the main tip here is to try to stay in open spaces as much as you can, because it's very easy to avoid all of the Bobs in open spaces. You'll likely be chased for extended periods of time sometimes, but that's not really an issue if, once again, you just stay in open areas. Sometimes you will get objectives in narrow places, and that's one of those cases that you can't help. You have to do it. Just hold the run button, which, Chyro will be goofing around like this, and you'll be good. I noticed that they reduced the speed of the normal sprint, so you will have to make use of that extra or special run animation. That way you can easily outrun the Bobs and you'll be okay. And of course, the more objectives you finish, the more money you'll make. One gripe that I have with this mode is that the objectives can actually take a lot of time to pop in. So a lot of the time you'll be just roaming around without an objective, just avoiding the Bobs until you get a text message that has, you know, the instructions for the next thing. Though I guess this is probably intentional, because in a way this is hide and seek with Bob, or a group of Bobs even. Up next is the All-Star Tournament, and this has to be one of my favorite things they've ever done, just because of how simple and how fun it is. And you get to make good money while you're at it as well. This is basically a Coliseum tournament that has you fight against all of the story bosses, and strangely enough, much like Battle for Survival, Hamazaki is also included here, despite not being a boss in the main story, which... Remember in the iceberg video when I said, yeah, maybe Hamazaki was planned to be a story boss? Well, with stuff like this, you can't really convince me otherwise. Well, I don't know, maybe they just thought we could have, like, made this guy a boss, but we didn't, so let's just drop him in here. I don't know. One of my favorite things about this mode is that you get to see information on the bosses that otherwise you probably would never find, like the age of the bosses. Like, would you ever have guessed that Richardson is actually 51 years old? Because I sure didn't. And god damn, the guy can move. Another thing that I love is how some of the bosses' quick time events will still play here. Much like Battle for Survival, I would really love to see a return of this mode, because it's just so much fun and it gives you a very good reward. All-Star Attack Tournament is basically the same thing as All-Star Tournament, except it's 2 versus 2, and with you is always going to be Majima, and for some reason he doesn't have his knife. So now that we have the full context of what the House of Extras is, did you know that Yakuza 4 also had a House of Extras? emphasis on had. And it wasn't exactly like Yakuza 3's, but it did share one mode like I mentioned, which we'll be talking about soon. In Yakuza 4, there's a little establishment called Naomi's Palace, which has the same fortune teller from Yakuza 3, and if you remember, alongside her is Bob Utsunomiya. And as we mentioned previously, you can claim a lot of items from him, you know, item packs, completion items, and so on and so forth. Now, let me drop something of a bomb to you. Now, memorize how this scene looks like. Good? We done? Alright. Now here's how the inside of this place looked like in the original Yakuza 4. Well, hello there, Bobs. Are you two related? Because you look exactly the same. So the first thing you're probably wondering about is, what the f is going on here? Well, meet Bob B, who you already know, and then there's Bob A, who most of you probably never had the pleasure of meeting. So what is the story of Bob A exactly? You see, Bob A was in charge of the House of Extras in Yakuza 4 instead of Naomi. And even in Yakuza 4, it still had the same idea of giving you access to a bunch of different modes. But unlike Yakuza 3, most of these modes had their own leaderboards, so they were more of a challenge thing than a fun thing. Though, I would say they're also pretty fun. Now, the only exception with the leaderboards is Survival Tag, which instead of being a competitive thing, just rewarded you with money, much like Yakuza 3's House of Extras did. The others are purely just for fun and for you to get a high score that you can brag about. Now let's talk about what those options are. When you talk to Bob A, you'll be given several options. They're actually a bit of a mouthful, so I'm gonna read them off of here. Underground Coliseum SP Battle King Championship. That's one whole name. Underground Coliseum SP Fastest Killer Championship. Survival Tag SP. Endless Survival Tag, Underground Parking Lot Speed King Championship, and an option that basically explains what to expect out of each of these. So, because these names are a whole novel on their own, we're gonna shorten them a little bit. We'll be calling them the Battle King, Fastest Killer, and Speed King Championships. So let's start with the first one, the Battle King Championship. Are you one of those people that lamented the fact that Akiyama and Tanimura could not access the Coliseum in Yakuza 4? Maybe you just really enjoyed their combat and you thought that being able to play as them in the Coliseum would be a very fun outlet for you to enjoy their combat beyond just street fights and story fights? Well, thanks to Bob A, that was actually possible, at least partially. This is a mode that threw you in the arena and just threw infinite amounts of goons at you. And the goal was simple. Defeat as many of them as you can before you die. And there's actually a pattern here with the enemies that loops, but before that loop starts, you begin with 4 unique enemies that don't show up again. And as soon as you beat the first enemy, the loop starts from there with the first enemy that spawns after that. The last enemy of this loop will always be an NPC called King. And as his name implies, he will always have this crown on his head. But interestingly enough, his moveset differs depending on which character you're playing as. If you're playing Akiyama, he's gonna have a katana. If you're playing as Tanimura, he will have brass knuckles. If you're playing as Saejima, he will have a pistol. And if you're playing Kiryu, he will have Richardson's moveset for some reason. Each of the 4 characters have their own separate leaderboards, which is for the best because, as you can imagine, Kiryu and Saejima are absolutely broken in this mode. There's one main reason for this. They both have survival abilities that the other 2 protagonists don't. And those are the ability to actually heal yourself if you have flashing red health, and the second allows you to stay alive as long as you're in heat mode. Because of those 2 survival abilities that the 2 have, I still remember just how ridiculous the leaderboards looked for those 2. I am still positive that for one of those 2, if not both, the top 1 was someone that made it past 10,000 enemies. And that is ridiculous. That takes a long time. I'm talking like, you'll play, kill 1,000, probably call it a day, go to sleep, wake up, go to work or school, come back, and continue playing, and then like it takes a long time. You would 100% have to keep the PS3 on. Meanwhile, poor Tanimura and Akiyama would be lucky if they get anywhere close to 1,000. You can't bring anything to this fight except your level and abilities, You can't use healing items, so you have to be really careful. It's worth mentioning that even with the survival abilities that Chyro and Dojima have, you will still have to be very careful because of specific enemies that are in this loop. The loop includes someone with a taser, and we all know how dangerous tasers are in particularly Yakuza 3 and 4, and the other enemy has a machine gun. So if you get distracted too much by a certain enemy, and that machine gun guy is in the back, GG. And also keep in mind that the other unarmed enemies can pick up the weapons dropped by any enemy with a weapon, and I noticed that those enemies get really aggressive with the attack frequency once they pick up a weapon. So that can easily get you in a stun lock combo and just end everything for you. And of course it goes without saying, but you're also able to pick up those weapons and make use of them. Fastest Killer Championship is a mode similar to Battle King Championship, except you only have a set amount of enemies in this, and you just have to kill them as fast as you can. Simple, right? Every playable character, once again, has their own leaderboards for this because, you know, they all have different abilities that could change how you go about the fight. There's really not much to say about this one except that your boy, the king, is back in this one. And this time, he has 3 butlers with him, so that's awesome. Survival Tag SP is the one mode that pretty much returned as is, except now you can play it as any of the pro tags. And as we mentioned earlier, this is not ranked. You get a monetary reward out of it, again, based on your performance. So much like the one in Yakuza 3, you have 10 missions, you start with 5 bobs looking for you, and then as you do more missions, more of them join in and hunt you down. A bit of an odd thing that I noticed, but every protagonist that is not Chyro will change their walking and sprinting animations to Kiryu's here, so I wonder what happened there. They added one incredible feature that wasn't in Yakuza 3, and that is afros. Green afros scattered around Kamurocho that you can pick up and wear. These bad boys will stop the bobs from chasing you in the blink of an eye, and it doesn't matter if you pick it up and wear it right in front of them. It'll still work. Look at how freaking groovy the boys look with this on. God damn. But yeah, not much more to say about this. Cool stuff regardless. Endless Survival Tag is, as the name implies, survival tag, but it doesn't end until you're caught. This one is ranked and doesn't give you a monetary reward after you're done. And it doesn't matter which protagonist you pick for this, none of them have any advantage over the other, so that means the leaderboard is all shared. It is worth noting though that this one starts out more difficult than the normal survival tag. Whereas the normal survival tag starts with 5 bobs looking for you, this one starts with 8. And they still do increase. So eventually it'll be a whole town of bobs chasing you to the ends of the earth, and that is terrifying. Lastly, we have the Speed King Championship, which takes place in the underground parking lot of Kamurocho, where you have to run 3 laps around it as fast as you can. Along the way, there will be different obstacles like trash bins, people, and barrels, and so on and so forth. And much like Endless Survival Tag, which character you pick here doesn't really matter because none of them have an advantage over the other, so the leaderboard is all shared. So now that we know all of this, never forget what they took away from us. The bottom line of this video is purely just that I want to say I want to see more modes like this come back for the future games. Perhaps even a return of the House of Extras as we know it, or maybe they could change it a little bit to be a bit more appropriate with whatever the future games' contents are. Generally speaking, I think that any kind of content with replay value like this is always a good thing, and people really won't complain about it. Maybe unless they make it part of the completion list, which even then, people who go for completion in these games are insane anyway, so it doesn't matter because they'll still pursue it. Okay, I'm joking. Completion gang, listen, I respect the hustle, I respect the grind, I promise. But the House of Extras in both Yakuza 3 and 4 are just a set of modes that are there for you to play without the pressure of like forcing you to do it, and that's part of the charm of it. And it even rewards you with a lot of money, at least mostly in Yakuza 3's case. And even though I don't think it's as good, I do appreciate an attempt in a later game with the bouncer missions in Kiwami 2, where they just had this mode where you just fight enemies, like waves and waves of enemies, and you would get rewards out of it as well. Though I think I would consider that more of a side activity than a post-game kind of thing, which I would say is what the House of Extras is. I mean, after all, you can only access the House of Extras in Premium Adventure after you beat the game. And I just think that stuff as simple as allowing you to fight the story bosses again is free content. They don't necessarily need to make any new assets for this, like it's all there, the bosses are there. They just have to make a mode where they kind of reorganize how you do it maybe, or reshape how you do it. Kind of like how Yakuza 3's House of Extras had you fight the story bosses, just in, the underground Coliseum, instead of, teleporting you to the story locations and all that, which isn't actually a bad thing either. Dead Souls did that, and I think it was still pretty convenient. As we mentioned in a very recent video, Yakuza Dead Souls has this feature that you can access in Premium Adventure that allows you to just jump straight back into a story segment. And I think a return of that would be greatly appreciated by everyone. So all in all, I feel like there's a lot that they can do to enhance the experience of a game and the replayability of it, and that stuff doesn't really include having to make new assets. It'll definitely satisfy more people having just more stuff to mess around in these games, so it's a win-win for everybody. Having more simple additions like the Battle King Championship would be so awesome. It's basically just the kind of game mode that you could boot up the game for to just kind of scratch that combat itch. But what do I know? What do you guys think? At the end of this video, I would like to thank all of you for watching this video and just watching my videos in general. I apologize in advance because I am gonna go ahead and do the YouTuber thing by saying, if you like this video, leaving a like, a sub, or a comment would help me out a lot, and I would really appreciate it. With this video and the last one, the aim was to kind of highlight some of the obscure things about the older games that I think a lot of people didn't know about, and I wanted to let people know about those, because I think it's important that we have just knowledge about all of these things that we could have had but didn't. So I do hope this was something of an educational watch to at least some of you out there. And even if it wasn't, like you didn't learn anything new and you still watched the video, like I don't know, maybe you just enjoyed listening to me talk about Yakuza or like whatever, then again, thank you. I appreciate that even more because you don't have a reason to stick around other than, well, listen to me. And as usual, I'd like to thank all of the Hannya members and all of the Dragon members for their constant support in which they always go the extra mile. I'm always grateful that you guys decide to show extra support, and I just hope that you guys will enjoy more content to come. So thank you all. So yeah, you guys stay safe, stay hydrated, and stay healthy. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye, you guys. Psst, hey, you're still here, right? Well, since you are, hear me out for a bit. If you're looking for a refreshing companion to your long gaming sessions, check out the Healthy Gamer Subs energy formulas. Extremely easy to prepare, filled with vitamins and nutrients to keep you focused on your gaming sessions, especially long ones. Use the code DEVILLEON7 to get 10% off on your orders, and in doing so, you'll also help me out a lot. Thank you so much for watching again, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.